Just so you know, I've been more in my head lately than usual, so I talked for about 20 minutes this intro. So if you're not interested in hearing me try to understand what consciousness is, I would go ahead and fast forward to about the 20-minute mark or so. But yeah, here you go. All right, I have a lot to unpack. I have been so heavy with thought lately. It has made me sort of numb. And I don't know if talking about it will help that, but I guess we'll see. Every time I'm thinking something, I'm usually putting it in different compartments. So sometimes I think something and I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep that one to myself. Other times I think, all right, that's going to fit in my journal. I'll write that down to have. Other times I actually think I'll discuss that in the podcast. That'd be a good thing to dwell on, and maybe if I free think it unscripted, that I'll get somewhere with it. This is usually not the case. And other times I like to think that it'll fit in my book, which is from the perspective of a fictional character. So that's usually more specific things or things that I can mold in a broad sense. But lately those things have all kind of been meshing together, and I'm not really sure of anything. Before I get into that, I am sure that it's spook time. Halloween's in a few short days, and I hope that everyone enjoys the candy and friendship that Halloween brings with it. So, I guess I'll begin with discussing a book I read, which kind of started this whole downward spiral. It's called Freedom from the Known by Jiddu Krishnamurti. It's about 100 or so pages, and it's basically it undoes everything, essentially. And by that I mean love and fear and violence and thought and consciousness on its own. And it kind of turned my mind inside out. The point of the book, which is interesting to say considering the book rejects the idea of points being made on things, Krishnamurti denies himself an authority on the subject and says not to allow him to be a guide or a coach, which sets you up for confusion. But I think the point of the book is to question everything as a structure, and you have to really stop and think about that in every sense of the word to actually understand what it means. So he's basically talking about this way of thinking that is unable to be filled with conflict. And this is because humans find conflict in everything due to our arrogance. We think everything is in relation to ourselves. We think thought and consciousness in the world around us and morals and values and love and hate, this is all pertaining to us, and it's all through us. It's all about our sense perception. And what the book is discussing is that you have to view these things as a structure rather than what is. I don't know how he puts it into words, but essentially, if you stop and you look at everything as, okay, let me try to say it a different way. So basically, he talks a lot about time and how the only thing that matters and the only thing that is us is the now, the second. And every time that we hold on to feelings of regret, or we get angry, or even when we love someone, we're comparing it to the past, and we're using our memories to make the present, which means we're not living in the present at all, which means it doesn't belong to us. We're constantly comparing everything to the past. And it's a very interesting way of thinking, and you can hear what I'm saying, and you can read what he's saying and think, oh, yeah, but you're not you're not really getting it unless you actually try to accept that in a way and think that everything that is happening, absolutely everything, my interpretation of this, the words that are coming out of my mouth, the way that you feel listening to this, none of that is actually what is. It is not what we need to spend our time with. And it's due to these things that we have conflict. It's due to our ideas of wealth and of war and things like that. It's all of these things that we have conflict. And when you look at everything as simply is, you don't attach your emotion to it, you don't attach your prejudices to it, you don't attach your memories to it, you cannot have conflict. Because say you love someone and they don't love you back, or you don't think they do. What's happening there is you are building what you think is love out of the past memories you have of them. You're not actively loving them now. Because to love now is to grow consistently rather than think that what this person is their past. And this is the fault, is that we're not living individually presently. We're living in our memories. So we don't really have a now, we just have a reflection on the past. So say that you love someone, or you think you do, and they don't love you. What's happening there is that's not love. It's as simple as that. That is not what love is. That is what you think love is, and what you're projecting love onto. So when you step back and you look at love as it is, untouched, pure, then you can understand that there's no reason to be worried in this situation, because the love is simply not there. And to put this perhaps more clearly, what I mean by that is, when you say you love this person, you're not actually concerned with the pure love that you have for them. You're concerned with your idea of the love that you have for them. So in this way, you're being selfish, because true love is selfless. True love does not include your sadness. It doesn't include your envy if the situation calls for that. It doesn't include any of this. And Krishnamurti says, when you lose someone you love, you shed tears. Are your tears for yourself or for the one who is dead? And this is with death, of course, but similar in if you're losing someone. And he says, are you crying for yourself or for another? Have you ever cried for another? And I think what he's saying here is that a lot of what we do is selfish, because it's all out of ourselves. When you're crying because you're out of a relationship, you're not crying because you love this person and they are gone. You're crying for a couple of reasons. You're crying because you are afraid of being lonely. You are afraid of the fear of not thinking that you love someone. And you're upset for your reasons. You're upset for your reaction to the situation. And this is of course understandable, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a misreading of what you think love actually is. And he says, when you ask what love is, you may be too frightened to see the answer. And this is true, because it's very radical what he's saying. It undoes everything that we think, and we feel offended if I say something like, you don't know what love is. That feels offensive, but it's not the case, because if you can actually truly step back and see what love actually is, or see what fear actually is, then you can't have this offense. You can't have this conflict or anger. And I think that's the point of it, is that he's just trying to get you to step back and not be stuck in the same ways that you've learned. And yeah, his point is that if you're seeking love, or you're analyzing love, or you're saying so proudly that you love someone, then you're not really understanding what that love is, because that love doesn't need to be declared. That love is simply felt. And this is true with all the other things he's talking about. And basically he's saying that there's fear. The reason we have conflict is due to fear, whether it be of success or wealth or love or whatever it may be. We are constantly subscribing to the idea that we have to be in the known. And there's fear in that. Now, I'm trailing and probably not doing the best job of explaining as he does, but the essence of the book is that we think that everything that is true because we think it. We think that everything through thought is so. And it's just not the case. And when you can step back and see thought as a construct, as a structure, then you can totally understand what you are. And I think that thing is consciousness, the actual being of consciousness. Now, how I've been thinking about this, I'm forced to do things. I'm not forced. That was silly. I'm in a time in my life where I'm consistently on a schedule where I can't sit and just think. So every time I'm in class or I'm at my job, there creates this dissonance when I think about things like Christian. I'm already talking because while it's really powerful to step back and, as he says, have a mutation of your psyche and look at things completely different. To not look at love as something that is, or fear as something that is, or violence as something that is, but simply something that we think is through our thought. To actually do that is, it's incredibly powerful. But it's so hard to actually get into that mindset. It's so easy to focus on what's in front of us because that's what there actually is. It's what there actually is, and it's so hard to remove myself from that when I'm constantly being surrounded by it. This is so hard to explain, but I guess the root of what I'm saying is there's always something in us that is fearful. There's something that's questioning. We're always contemplative of violence and sorrow and grief and regret and confusion. And the book is attempting to undo those things. And once you can see them as happenstance, once you remove you from it, only then maybe can you find calm and not conflict, because we always feel like this is happening to me. And when you can step back and see these conflicts as a structure, and when you see yourself as only an observer of it, all you are doing is watching it happen, then you can understand that you are right now. You're this exact moment, and that is what you are. You are not yesterday. You are not tomorrow. You are not your dreams. You are this exact moment experiencing what's happening. And if you can actually really wrap your mind around that in any way, it can free you. It can absolutely free you from conflict and from all these other human problems that we have. And we're too busy saying that fear is the most important thing to acknowledge that fear for what it is. And this is the problem, that the most important thing, consciousness and understanding the purity of who you are, this is what we spend the least amount of our time thinking on. And that's why it seems so radical and it seems so untrue. Shit. All right. Well, I rambled enough about that. I don't know if it got through it all. I apologize if this intro is too long. You can just skip ahead if you need to get to the chat. But I've had a lot on my mind, and I don't know if this is the place to do it, but I feel like I've just been bottled up. The main thing I've been thinking about is, okay, let me try to say this. There is, I believe, a thing in all of us, whether it's active or not, especially in me. It's not necessarily a question. It's not anything that we can really put words to. The problem is there's that pit of feeling. You can call it fear of the beginning, not knowing where we came from. You can call it fear of death, because that's some people's most important worry in life, is what happens to us after death. You can call it something deeper, like the questioning of thought in general, the question of consciousness. What is consciousness itself? How did it come to be? And did it come to be? And is there such a thing as coming to be? You can call it that. But regardless of what you call it, there is something in all of us, and it's there. And no matter how many books of philosophy I read, no matter what I study, no matter what anyone studies, there's no true way of knowing. We are admitting that there has to be something to subscribe to, whether it be a religion, whether it be something like Krishnamurti's undoing of everything and just calling us pure consciousness. That could still be wrong, technically. But I do believe that there's an argument that that has to be closer to the truth, because it's the deepest form of understanding to say that we are consciousness. In an absolute nutshell, all we are is watching ourselves think and wonder and hope and dream and fear and get angry. And this kid in my class, I don't remember what we were talking about, but he mentioned this. He just said thing, this deep thing, whether it be the sadness or the grief. He said unhappiness is what he called it. He said being unhappy. And you can't even put it into words. It's so powerful. And this is what sits with me. And my problem is that there's no absolute truth. It does not exist for me to know an absolute truth, at least not with the mind that I have. I don't know if others can, and that's incredible to think they can. But I cannot know that there's an absolute truth. Now, here's the thing. When I say that, I'm saying that I know something. If I say there's no absolute truth, then I'm saying the absolute truth is that there is none. And when I'm saying that, I'm creating a paradox. And it's so hard to think that the most important question in life is a paradox, at least to me. That all I want is to hold on to something. All I want is to feel that anything, whether it even be Krishnamurti's idea that nothing is able to be held on to, even that, I want to know that that's true, or that I can feel comfortable with it. And I don't know now if that feeling will ever come. And maybe even my contemplation on this is a waste of time, and it's not getting the message as I just tried to explain it. Because again, I'm relating everything to myself. We're pretending that life is a question of, what do I get to figure out? What do I have to know? What is the truth to me? When maybe if you just accept the truth as just being absent from us, then maybe the question goes away. But I don't know. And I'm going to wrap this up soon because it's been about 20 minutes of me babbling, but I've also been thinking a lot about God, talking to my roommates about Jesus and various beliefs, and I don't want to get into that, but a lot of Indian philosophy suggests that that we are made of gods, that we are everything, and that monoism, the idea that there is no duality, there's no difference between man and God, this is the way to understanding everything. Because if we're separating ourselves, then we're automatically setting ourselves up for failure, because when you're detaching yourself from something, you're inevitably going to have questions. And Krishnamurti argues this, that to declare yourself a religion is to separate yourself from the rest of the world. And that's exactly what everyone does. I don't even know what I want. I don't even have a goal. And maybe that's the point, is that I don't need to have a goal. But I'm just still so curious how I'm supposed to function, how I'm supposed to still pursue money and whatever else it may be, because that doesn't really get touched on. It's just, here's how you think, and then once you have that, you don't worry about the other stuff, and you just go through the motions. And in Indian philosophy, there's also a book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is like the book, and it's a tale of a warrior named Arjuna speaking with the divinity Krishna about what all this means, and basically Arjuna doesn't want to go into battle. They're on a battlefield talking, and Arjuna doesn't want to go into battle because he has to fight his cousins. And he says, Krishna, I'd rather die than kill my cousins. I would not feel anything from that. And Krishna basically argues, how do you have the audacity to feel that, to think that you get to feel poorly about killing them? It is your duty to fight, and I, Krishna, am all things, and it's your duty. And there's a lot about just doing your duty and doing what you need to do day in and day out. And I don't know, my perspective is that I don't even know what to take from all this. I'm honestly overwhelmed with thought, and a bit of it feels freeing, and it feels important to think on these things, because I think I'm getting somewhere. But even this podcast, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? It is so trivial to be sharing conversation. I don't know. I'll get more into this another time. But really try to undo what you think thought is, I guess. Now to my guest. My guest, Colin Stetson. He just composed the soundtrack for Hereditary, and it was brilliant. I love this movie. I love this soundtrack. And Colin has also made some music with some of my favorite artists, Bon Iver and Arcade Fire. And it was incredible to get to speak with him. And I think this is where I can find comfort in my days, is talking. And as long as I'm talking and asking, I'm not stagnant. And I think that's important. Please devote your time to listening to Colin Stetson. It was such a nice experience to talk to him. And he's from Ann Arbor, so shouts out. Thank you if you listen to this. Thank you if you listen to the show. Thank you if you think anything of what I just said is impactful to you in any way. I know I'm trying. Please share this. Tell people to listen if you got anything from it. And watch Hereditary and listen to the soundtrack, as well as Colin's solo work. It's unlike anything I've ever heard. So thank you. Here's my conversation with Colin Stetson. I want to give a shout out to Ann Arbor because I'm actually in Ypsilanti right now.
No way.
Yeah, I go to school here. So
Okay.
That's crazy.
Well,
that's where
that.
You're from.
At
Yeah.
Eastern?
Yeah, I go to Eastern.
Great. Oh, man, it's been a long time since I was over there.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in Ann Arbor? Because I'm actually from Flint. Like, that's where I was born.
Okay.
So I didn't usually live down at the bottom. I lived more at the top. So I'm curious, what was it like living down here?
I have no other frame of reference, no other perspectives, but I enjoyed it. I liked growing up in that town. And back when I was growing up, I feel like it still had there was still a vestige of its earlier punk roots and days.
Mm-hmm.
And so there. I mean, I still got to play just ridiculous house parties, basement house parties throughout my teen years,
right?
And go to see all these underground shows, and there were still edgy venues, and there was a lot to do. The schools were great, and there was just tons of opportunity, and there's a lot of nature very, very close by.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
In terms of places to grow up, it was pretty tops. I liked it.
Yeah, it's a really nice place. I've only been here for a couple years now, but there's just a lot going on everywhere. And being in Ypsilanti, I'm like right between Detroit and Ann Arbor, so there's just tons of shows that I can go to like all the time,
yeah.
Which is dangerous because money, but
absolutely.
Yeah. So you were into like punk when you were younger? Is that the kind of music you listened to?
Not necessarily. I was kind of then as I am now, kind of across the board, a lot of different things. I grew up when I was little. I grew up on my dad's records, which were pretty much just a few selections of classic rock, heavy on the Hendrix, Beatles, and Jethro Tull.
Nice.
And then started listening. Kind of got into Michael Jackson and Prince heavily in my young days, and that spawned into a pretty deep affection for metal. Eventually, when in my preteen years, which then, got me to Mr. Bungle, which got me to Zorn, which got me to all sorts of, more free improvisation and noise musics.
Right.
And then, across the jazz spectrum, I started playing classically and studying classically when I was 15, which opened up that whole world. The different, elements of rock and pop and jazz and noise and then concert musics all just started breaking off into every different direction. It's really just it was just this network of intersecting veins that always led somewhere else, and that was back in the day when you really had to search things out.
Right. It wasn't like at the immediate, we have everything. Anyone can listen to anything at any time now.
And the fact of that choice really, that's why playlists are so ubiquitous, and people really don't even want to search things out. They simply want someone to tell them in this vastness of choice what it is they should be listening to. But yeah, when I grew up, a record still cost $15, and you went into the aisles and went to all the different genre sections and tracked things down and hoped that you spent your money that month on the right one or two things.
Right.
And if you didn't, you had to show up at the used place and hope that they'd give you some amount of it back.
Right. How do you is that kind of sad now to see how music's become? Because I feel like there's two sides of it, where it's definitely positive that more people can hear things that they never would before, but it also, like you said, people just kind of take what's curated for them, and there's a lack of exploration, at least around my age and the general pop. I feel like
the access is wonderful. The fact that that the model that has been adopted, that was forced on to everyone by streaming services and the major labels in their agreement, the fact that model is one which gives up all of the entirety of the intellectual property of music in perpetuity for free, and that it's made an entire generation of people just assume that music should be and will always be free of any cost. That, I think, is incredibly damaging in so many different ways, and to a certain degree is to blame for why people may be a little bit less invested in the choice aspect of it, and it's really, even if they were to have set up something where there was never the ad revenue based free choice to listen, if it had been that $10 a month got you everything that there ever was, that would have been better. Because right now, we think that the ad revenue, the free users are paying in some way to anything, but it's just simply not true. The math of it is just that 90% of there's only about 10% of people who use the services that pay.
Wow, I had no idea.
90% of those users are using the free ones. But the 90% who are using the free ones, that ad revenue only pays about 10% of what is going to musicians.
How is that
90% of what's going to musicians is coming out of the 10% who are actually paying the $10 a month. So even right there, even just gutting that idea that people should just be able to access all of this information for free would already do an enormous step towards actually getting musicians paid for these things getting streamed. But once you let the cat out of the bag, I'm not sure how you convince everyone that they now need to pay. I mean, simply similar to social media. If it wasn't for the fact that it was all free and and that their their value was based in advertisement, we might not be all getting manipulated to the degree that we're getting manipulated right now.
Right, and I've had a lot of talks about that in class and stuff, where there's this level of entitlement that we have because it's free, and so we feel like social media like belongs to us. And I think the same thing's happening in music. Like, we're like, yeah, of course we get to listen to that because it's for us. You know what I mean? But it's just because what we're seeing is entirely being manipulated for us, even when it comes to music. And it's just because they pop an ad up here or there. And it's this strange level of like we don't own any of that. Like, it's essentially trying to think that we are the product, not like the social media is not the product. The music's not really the product anymore. Like, we are the product that is being sold or manipulated more than anything else that we're actually viewing. And that's just a really strange construct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The actions of every individual in aggregate is the product. And it didn't have to be the way, and it doesn't still have to be that way. But not enough people are paying attention to that, to the danger and to the alternatives, and the ones that are paying attention probably are not paying it enough heed.
Yeah,
So,
it's just because it's so big now, and it got so out of control so quickly. It's like, okay, that's just how things are now, and I don't know. It's so institutionalized too that it's really easy to feel like David and Goliath. Like, it's just too big of a hurdle to overcome, I guess.
Yeah, it is very, as we know from all aspects of society, civilization, on governmental levels, to do with all of these systems, all these institutions. Once they get to, you're dealing with such bloat, such that affecting any real systemic change always seems like it's, if not just outright impossible, then such a daunting task as to dissuade most people from ever thinking that it is possible. So I don't know how it actually gets, any progress actually gets done. I mean, I know it all seems to be very gradual, and that very little affected change happens quickly without catastrophe. And I just don't think that, in terms of just specifically looking at the streaming model for musicians and music, the catastrophe was gradual enough, and one that really affected just one part of the population, and the small sector of creators, and with the wave that away from paying for it, also came this really insidious narrative, which every time it came up, and it came up on NPR, it came up all over, anytime anybody was talking about this in news media, there was always oh, sure, they don't make any money off of selling their albums anymore, but they make so much more money playing live shows now, and they get to play more. They get to play more, which A, is not true, and B, if it was true, would be such a foul fucking thing to say about somebody. Like, hey, you should be thanking us because we're stealing your intellectual property, because now you get to spend your whole life out on the road and never having any relationships or home life at all.
You're just a puppet. Thank you.
So yeah, it's but again, it's simply not true. There was a slight uptick over a couple years where small venues were actually seeing a little bit more traction, but for the last 6 years, they've all been in massive decline, and the only thing that is making more money are big ticket festivals. So
Really?
yes, if you're a big ticket festival, you're selling more than you've ever sold before. But venues that are smaller than 3,000 seats, those are in the shitter.
Yeah, and it's like if you're buying festival tickets, you're not even like you're not buying it for that artist. Like some people do, but like how does that money even go to the artist equally if it's just for the festival, like in general?
Exactly. Yeah.
I just see. I don't know how any of it works, so it scares me because I always want to support artists, and I still buy vinyl, I still buy CDs. Like I won't touch digital music. Like that's a whole nother thing because I'm pretentious or whatever. But I always I always will buy the records of the artists that I support, and it's like sometimes I'll listen to an album like free, guiltily to see if I like it. You know what I mean? And like I still feel bad because. Like, do you feel like we should still be buying things blindly just for the sake of music, and then if we don't like it, we don't like it? Or do you think that, like, that's still a good way to use it, is to, like, see, like, to test run it?
I think it's maybe not practical or feasible to thinking that you should simply just abide by the old standard, because the structure just isn't in place to do that the same way, and also denying the access entirely is I feel like is a little bit limiting, but for me, yeah, the purchase of most things on vinyl and digitally is how I continue to support the music that I like to listen to and support. And going forward, in terms of a model to be aware of, and to maybe try to pour all of your support into as they happen, is the advent of streaming services that have alternative models of income and distribution. So there have been some that have tried to get off the ground and have not been successful, but there are more that are trying to do this, where streaming is simply it's kind of it's incremental, and so for example, basically to listen to something once, to try it out, doesn't cost you much of anything. It costs your account something like 0.05 cents.
Wow.
And then over the course of 10 listens, you have spent enough. You've spent with every with incrementally increasing charge for every listen. You then have spent I think $1, and you own the song, and you never pay for it again.
What?
So then,
that's insane.
Yeah, well, that's an idea for something that would actually get money to people, because it
that
the
makes
amount
sense,
of money that it would equate to would be much more so.
But instead, you just
what
pay
is currently going to
$3
to artists. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said, but instead you just pay $3 and listen to whatever, wherever.
Yeah. The current thing with everything just being free or being just kind of like a flat $10 for whatever you can consume in a month is it's patently absurd, thinking that money is going to actually get in the hands of anybody, especially when you think the kinds of music that people listen to over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Are not necessarily, there are certain musics that I adore that are some of my favorite things that have ever been created, but I don't listen to them very regularly.
Right, because they're special, and sometimes they're just
and
weird.
Maybe they're a little bit more of a very particular kind of listening experience, like more difficult musics, more challenging musics, more musics that are just immersive. You're not necessarily going to put that on at a dinner party or when you're going to the gym. So it's going to get, they're going to get, fewer plays.
Right.
So it doesn't, so for something like that, they would, back in the day, you would have made more money on, that artist would make more money selling a single CD to someone who would listen to it maybe 20 times in their life. But the major labels will make much more money with this model, having a track be played just ubiquitously across all platforms, in everybody's playlist, in every shop, and everything, as background music, and in every gym. That it's a different way of monetizing, and then it definitely skews in favor of a very particular kind of music. So yeah, we could go into that shit forever. It's pretty dark.
It's so shitty. Like, we can move on to something else soon, because this is just going to get depressing, but like,
it's already gotten quite quite depressing, but and it could get more.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask.
But we certainly don't have to.
Do you think it's going to get worse before it gets better? Like, what is even the end game? Because it's not like it's going to go in reverse and artists are going to suddenly be like you said, I don't ever see anyone advocating for this, partly because people just get their music so they don't give a shit, and partially because there's just so much other shit going on right now, like in our country and just everything, that like, that's not, like, music is the place that people go to escape that shit. So the last thing they're going to want to do is start to advocate where they don't have to advocate. You know what I mean? So,
well, people simply rationalize after the fact the free the free cost to everything. I mean, I've heard it from people who I know making these weird these strange, these bizarre arguments about, in basically in defense of never purchasing a single thing in music related for it. Just the same sort of things, using these like, well, now they make so much more money with live performance, or now it means that more people have access to your music and it's all there. It's the ways that people go about feeling good about the fact that they are not.
Yeah, they're just making excuses for themselves.
A service. So, because ultimately, the only thing that I think could push it in the right direction is if this push, most people right now have become aware that of the dangers and the real sinister nature of how they have been psychologically and economically manipulated by social media.
Mm-hmm.
And there is more of a push with that because it hits them on a personal level. It's about them, and it's about their privacy, and it's about their lives. The idea that there could be some sort of a shift in a new platform offered with social media, where it's a pay model that ends up getting you outside of this kind of like the advertisement manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
That seems more likely to me to happening. And if that happens, then perhaps there's a backdoor for music streaming to do the same thing, for some platforms to come up that offer that same alternative. And I think that there could be a piggybacking there, but I'm not really that confident that it would just come of its own volition.
Right. I mean, that's not totally pessimistic though, so that's good.
No, I'm not totally pessimistic.
That spawned a couple of questions. First, I'm curious, like, how do you use social media?
I don't really use it. I use it to inform people of shows,
mm-hmm.
and just to kind of as a bit of feedback loop I'm active on Twitter insofar as when there is chatter about any of the work that I'm doing, I try to be present with people and
Right.
and if there's any, with people who are praising or have any questions or anything like that. And otherwise, it's just there for me to post news and to keep people informed.
Right.
But I don't really share at all any personal aspects of life on that. I revolted from it years ago. I was instantly repulsed
Yikes.
because I'm extremely particular and selective when it comes to who I spend my time with. I have very little of it, and so I have some friends who I make and I keep forever, and I spend my time with those people, and it's
Right.
And so the idea that one would just simply share all things with just whoever. I mean, honestly, with everything, with everybody, just posting. I don't really understand. I don't understand the impetus. I don't understand the motivations behind that. The initial instinct to simply say this is all of me. Here, just have at it. Because I guess it feels cheap.
Yeah, it's nothing special anymore.
Well, yeah, because anybody can access it. So how did they earn that access?
Yeah.
They didn't. So there's that. But so I just never really engaged in it before, and I continued that. And if it wasn't for the fact that musically it is I guess a near essential tool for advertising, I wouldn't use it at all.
Yeah. See, that's weird for me to hear because I grew up knowing only that. So I'm in this weird space where I feel like I can definitely understand like where you're coming from and that side of it. And I'm very, very critical of it, but I still use it. And it's just this weird space of like, I don't know who's going to see this. Like, do I really care about like I constantly question like, why do I share this? And what I do share is like, I'll share my podcast, or I'll share, I don't know, something I'm writing, and I think, like you said, it is definitely a tool. Like, it's amazing how many artists you can reach just from whatever, and how many people can be connected in ways they wouldn't be able to be before. And I'll share like a song I'm listening to, because that's not like, haha, look at me, everyone, I'm listening to music, I'm very cool. But I genuinely aim to like share it. Like I try to use it for the actual reason it is, like to have someone see that song and be like, oh, maybe I'll listen to that, and then they hear it and they like it. But that doesn't feel like the aim of other people, especially not specifically like if they share songs or whatever. Like the thing that makes the most sense to me that I've heard argued, I took a technology class, and it was philosophy of technology. So it was a lot about why we use social media and like what the actual point of it is. And a lot of what I gathered is that it's just like especially people my age, we don't know how to not feel like lonely, or we don't know how to feel lonely, I guess. Like we're so scared.
That's better put, yeah.
We're so scared of like, it's always like, look at me, like I'm valid in the world. If I'm doing something and other people are seeing that I'm doing it, like then it's valid, right? Like I'm living, right? I'm doing things right. And I just watched this documentary about this photographer, and he said, this was like a long time ago, but he said nowadays it's more about being at or it's more about having been to the event than actually going to the event. And I feel that so strongly, and it scares me more than anything else. Like I don't see much. I follow a lot of artists that are just doing cool things like on Instagram and stuff, and they're sharing themselves making beats and they're interacting with their fans, and like that's awesome. Then I'll just see people like I can tell when you're just sharing it to share it, you know, and it's this weird thing where every time I go to post something, I'm like, okay, do I really need to go into detail on this? Or if whoever really gives a shit wants to know about it, they're going to talk to me about it one-on-one. So like, are there that many people that I care just enough about that they vaguely know what I was doing to even share this? I don't know. I'm in my thoughts, I guess. But
visibility is a commodity at this point, and because so if everyone is everyone is constantly seeking these kind of these infinitesimal rewards from every little like and notice that they've gotten from the world. So it's very easy to see how it starts and how these habits feed into a bigger dependency on more of the same. Undoing it seems pretty pretty daunting.
You got me. I'm just going to go delete all my social media after this.
Well, have you read the Jaron Lanier's book yet?
No, I haven't.
Check that one out. He's got, I think it's, what is it? I think it's called something like 6 Reasons to Delete All Your Social Media Right Now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it yet. A friend of mine just finished and said that, and did just that. And apparently it's a very convincing.
I've done that
convincing argument.
I used to do it a lot more when I didn't have my podcast and I wasn't constantly obliged to be sharing, like you were saying about your music. But I would go through phases where I would just delete everything for 3 weeks and just not think about it, not touch it. And I never felt I was missing anything. All the people that I wanted to see doing stuff, we talked, we hung out, we spent time together in person. And I don't know, but I there's still that dopamine hit where and most of the shit I see I don't care about. And it's okay, I'm glad that person's still whatever in that frat, but then it's
yeah.
But
well,
there's
what
still
it's experiential fast food, and I mean that pretty much literally, because
that's a beautiful way to say
what
that.
about us? Why do we crave why is fast food successful? Why was it, and why does it continue to be successful? Because we are this organic system that is has been evolved to seek out the most fuel for the least amount of energy exhaustion. So we find this food source that has just huge empty calories, and hugely inexpensive in terms of how what it costs us to get it. There's no work, and there's very very little resource that needs to be expended. And so it makes perfect sense. And the same thing goes for everything going for all of social media, and the life on the internet. It is supplying you your brain chemistry with all of the same things as actually living life would supply you with. And in some in some arguments, I mean it's actually a much higher, more concentrated dose of all of that, because in a sense it's giving you kind of like a hyper realized version of what it would have been like to be a hunter-gatherer pre-agricultural days, when anything outside of the 100 people that is a threat, and is something. And so there's the in-group, out-group is palpable, and it's really turned up. The volume on that is turned up to the max, and so you get into the internet, and it is that, just exponentially compounded, and so then which gives rise to all the other problems we have politically and whatnot right now. But but it simply triggers all the same things, but and it does so with us having expended no physical energies and put ourselves in no way at physical risk. And
Right.
so it is just that you're getting all the same bang and arguably much bigger dose of it all for very low cost, biologically speaking. And so how do you turn that off?
It's not going to turn off. It's just not. Well, damn. I wrote out a big ass list of questions to ask you, and I only got to ask you one. So let's talk about your music a little bit. I read a lot of the interviews you did for Hereditary, so I don't want to bore you with like the same old questions.
No, thank you.
So, so how does it feel now that some time has passed since like the movies come out and the albums come out? Like, how do you feel about it?
I'm very happy with it. Having seen the film and having it all of the aspects of it be fully realized, I'm incredibly satisfied with the whole thing. I had a great time. It was as close to a perfect working relationship and work experience as I think one can get at.
That's awesome.
Ari and I he came to me a very, a year at least, if not two, before he had gotten all of his funding and everything together, and casting and everything. So I was the first one involved and was able to get a lot of writing done well in advance of shooting.
Yeah, is that rare for films? Like, because it sounds like you were very early in the process.
It is very rare, but trying to make it more of a preferred model. I think more and more composers are demanding it when they can and requesting it across the board.
It feels like you're like not even just the composer. Like now you're a part of like not necessarily a writer and stuff, but I feel like you have way more of an idea of the feel of the film and like the story of it. And I think it shows in the music when you have been sitting with the ideas of it for a while and when you're in close connect with the director, whereas sometimes it's just like, okay, compose for this, you know what I mean? Like it feels very in sync, I think.
Yes, well, the problem with the old model of just waiting to the last minute to bring in a composer is that what that entails is that the entirety of the film has been edited to other music. It's not that they don't just edit it in silence and then attach music to it later.
Yeah, it's the temp music or whatever.
So they've already structured all the scenes to a kind of like a haphazard cobbling together of cues from other films, from other records, and then the composer comes in, has to look at all those, and if he's lucky, then they will be able to step away from this, the kind of Frankenstein of all of the temp and see some cohesive, coherent arc, and still make a score that really just has its own character and really just is as much is as integral and seamless an aspect of the film as any other aspect, but it just sets up so many hurdles because you're fighting not only again, like just not only from an internal perspective of thinking now that you've been influenced by all this temp throughout the whole thing, you have to then translate that all in, take what it was that the director and the editor wanted to accomplish with all this, what they liked about all the different temp, and then try to make some translate that into something that again has a coherent shape and character for the entirety of the film, not just from scene to scene,
right?
But also then
like,
you're fighting against you're fighting against every one of these individual scenes because all the beats that are hit throughout that scene, all of the sonic, it can get very, very particular what an editor and what a director and producers get attached to in those instances. And so you might you might make a piece of film music for a scene that is functioning perfectly, but timbrally it just doesn't have the same instrumentation.
Yeah.
And so someone who has been sitting with an earlier version of the scene for maybe 100 times through it as they edited it. How can they? In a sense, it's like it's and of course, that they're not going to cozy up to something new after that because they've been so ingrained with the other for so long.
That doesn't seem natural.
It's a really bad. It's a very bad model, and more and more people. I mean, the first thing that I remember talking to Johan Johansson about was that we were having lunch and he was talking about how he didn't use temp anymore, and he just demanded that he write music for the film and outside of it, like on the onset, and that the ideas that he had come up with, those things were used as the temp, and then he would expand off of that. And I've been trying to do that as much as possible. And so the last two things I've done, the TV show The First and Hereditary, both operated pretty much that way.
Yeah, I'm sorry about Johan. I didn't know you were like close or knew him at all. He's one of my, like, I love scores and I always pay very close attention to it, and his are like, they always stuck out to me so much different than anything else. And
I'm just a tremendous loss.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But I was curious how you took from him, but that makes sense when you say that. Like it feels so much more in the movie. Like it's like what you've said about Hereditary, how if like you're paying attention to the score, or it feels like you're hearing a score, you know what I mean? Like you failed to get the point. And like that's how his and your music feels. Like it's just a part of the film. It's not backed to the film, if that makes sense. And I think music is so important when it comes to film, and I think it consistently gets underrated because you just assume it's going to be there and there's going to be these perfect beats and it's going to carry it. But like if you listen or if you watch films without music, it's the most bizarre thing ever. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And so that whole process is just weird that you would come in at the last minute. And I never thought about that, how the editor is already sitting with something else. Like, of course it's going to be like just completely foreign. Like it's like, that'd be like bringing the director in like well after the scenes are shot and then be like, okay, how do you want this to look? Like, it's just not natural. And it feels like it's deconstructing the whole process of it being like a cohesive piece of art.
Yeah, and yet it's been something that's been an accepted practice for so many years. So, again, one of those things that it's good that people are talking about it more, and they are. In conversations, and on the job more so, it's been changing. So I'm hopeful. Going forward.
I've been learning a lot about like the film industry and how it began and what actually goes on in the making of films, and I feel like disappointed, or like, I don't know, it's like seeing your favorite food being made. Like there's so little. I feel like now there's a lot of indie projects and stuff that are like awesome and full of heart and are made for art's sake, but there's so much that's just made for like, it's just recycled shit, and it's like it's a business, and it started as a business, and I feel like that's really dangerous to use that kind of process where you're just like plugging in the same formulas, or you're just bringing in the composer at the end. Like it just doesn't feel as organic or special. And I'm glad that projects like Hereditary still exist, where they're coming from independent film studios and you can tell that they were made with passion and heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, it's expanding. People are noticing that there's that the results from something like that can be incredibly rewarding, and they're starting to double down on it. So yeah.
And then Avengers 15 comes out.
That
again.
that can also happen. There's space for both.
They make them so quickly. I had no idea. Like it's just one after another. It's weird.
$500 million is a lot of money.
that it is. And like
yeah.
it's sad though, because I've been learning about how like they don't even use the same directors, because the directors are like, damn dude, like I don't want to make the same thing over and over again. Like I want to have some leisure with it. And it's weird. It just doesn't make sense to me, especially because I'm studying film in school. And so it's like I would never do that. Like I would never see it as a commodity rather than art, which is like the sole purpose. I don't know. Oh, that brings me back to a question that I meant to ask you, like, I don't know, 30 minutes ago. At what point did your music go from like the priority being, I just want to get this out, to like understanding that you need to make money for it to like be a thing? Because I feel like we were talking about how people like just the whole thing about selling records and then getting it heard. Like when did that become a priority where it was like, I really want my stuff to just be heard, I'm fine with that, and then you were like, well wait, I need some compensation for this? Like when did that happen?
I don't know that I've ever separated the two of those things.
Really?
I've never been someone who simply was just like making it for the making it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's never been, I mean, since I was young, I've been making music and performing live, and I went to school for it. So it's all those things have been completely intertwined from the beginning. It's never been a hobby. It's never been something that I do simply for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like that's unique. Yeah.
I don't know that I can't really answer that question.
So when you watched the film, did it like make you feel like, did you get disturbed by your own music? Or was it just weird?
Yeah. And just, I mean, I was trying to be extremely economic with things in that score, and to be as restrained as was humanly possible. And I just tried to mirror only what was happening in, like, on the picture and in that narrative as it slowly unfolds. And so, which meant just kind of paring back here and there, making sure that nothing really ever attracted too much attention to itself sonically, melodically, any of those things. Just real avoidance of a lot of big, more heavy-handed devices, because I found that just a subtlety of maintaining, a subtlety of support, I guess, was far more beneficial to the way that film was working and unfolding than something that was a little bit more in your face and a little more upfront,
right?
In the thought process. So, yeah, watching it back. I mean, I had been watching it for months. The score was supposed to be, originally contracted at 45 minutes of music, and I think we ended up at 88.
Wow.
So it's something, and yet, it still feels as though there's a lot of space in the film, because we took advantage of when that space happened. It was in very opportune moments.
Yes, the silence is so like the silence stands out.
Yeah, and then and a lot of my impulse for creating the character of the score was simply to, in a sense, to think about kind of abstractly how would you represent the sound of silence being like the volume being turned up on silence, like on the ambient silence of a quiet house, and when you really look at the minutia, the white noise, the tiny little creaks and groans, when those things become the foreground. So in a sense, that's what I was trying to do with the overall air and quality of everything. That was the basis for the score, and and just to be relatively innocuous while still being affecting. Yeah.
My favorite thing from that whole movie, and I don't know, I assume it was you, but there's like a consistent like heartbeat in the background. I think that is brilliant. Like that alone made the movie so much more for me. Like there was never like there would be nothing happening. It would just be a completely normal scene that in every other horror movie, even though this wasn't really a horror movie, like if it was just a normal daytime scene, it would just be like, okay, this is the relief part. But there was never that relief. Like that little heartbeat in the background, everyone I've watched it with like didn't really notice it, but I always noticed it. And like especially the scene where Annie goes to Joni's apartment and it's just boom, 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 and then like when the door opens and it just stops. Like I think that's amazing. How did you like think to have that just consistent like unease with that little small like bass or whatever it was?
Those sounds are actually the keys, the percussion of the keys from my instruments, and so they are, with the way that I record things, they are pretty much ubiquitous in there. And for me, it was they're always there, and I can carve them in and out depending on what is going on in the scene, and so it's, I guess, specific for me, it's because it's such a huge aspect of the like an essential factor of the sound of the sounds that I create, and the music that I create solo wise, and on those on all the woodwind instruments, it's something that is just always there, and I don't even have to question the presence of it. So
right.
It's a device that I utilize a lot, and one that you can use it subtly and not so subtly, and whether people are conscious of it or not, it's something that is having effect on them and on their
I'm seriously like obsessed with it. Like I don't know what it is, but like I love that element of it so much, because I've never seen a movie where, like, I've seen movies where there's a constant thing in the background and it's like a note or like strings back and forth, but that didn't even sound like music. And however the mixing was done on that, like, it's just so perfectly subtle that, like, because I saw it in theaters for the first time and I couldn't breathe the whole time. And I think that little piece is so crucial to that, whether you realize it or not at all, like when you're watching it, if you hear it or not, like it just leaves you on edge because there's no like relief. And I found it to be brilliant. Like I've never seen a movie, like usually I can be like, okay, it shows the house in daytime. Now this is going to be the relief part where they just have some dialogue and move the plot along. And there was never that. It was just like a fucking fever dream. And I don't know. I loved it. I just loved it a lot.
Thanks, man.
So yeah, I'm fanboying a little bit, but
I'm coming up to run out of time.
Oh man, that stinks because I could talk forever. Okay, let me cram everything into the last couple minutes.
Okay.
I think it's amazing that you've worked with Bon Iver and Arcade Fire, and I want to thank you for those sounds.
My pleasure, man.
I don't know. Do you have like time for a question or two, or do you like have to go like right now? So okay, so the last thing we can talk about that's important. Tell me about the first a little bit. Like how'd you work with it, and like how was it different from Hereditary?
Oh, in almost every way, in terms of just approaching it. But it was another really incredible working relationship and experience. I got to supply the editors with an enormous glut of music, beforehand, not all, but most of the major themes were written well in advance and were all temped in. So
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I had maybe 4 cues with music that wasn't mine, temped in through the whole season. And so that was extremely positive. The showrunners specifically wanted me to approach it as I've approached my music in the past, and to have a sense of this being firmly rooted in the sounds and aesthetics of my solo music. And so it was a very comfortable and intuitive place to start from, and to build off of. And I guess the biggest contrast between this and Hereditary would be that where Hereditary was specifically avoiding theme and melodic devices and sentimentality and nostalgia and all of these normally well used motives. The first was entirely that. I was able to go really far into that direction, very far into kind of heartstring emotionality, and these epic main themes. But and then in the first, being able to then contrast that, juxtapose the epic and the sonorous and the cadential with something like a track like Fallout, in the first episode, where I was able to go pretty much full horror, just like a completely laid bare solo saxophone with key percussion and distortion and all these things. And later on in the episodes, really expansive ambient spaces that are really just very lazy and gorgeous. I got to do an enormous amount of very different quote unquote kinds of music that all were feeding into the same storyline and same narrative. So I had a ball with it.
That's awesome, man. I'm really glad to hear that. So do you think you're going to keep with the scores? Like, are you enjoying it a lot?
Yeah, very much so.
Cool. Well, I won't keep any longer. I have so much more I could ask you, but I really appreciate you talking to me today. It means a lot.
My pleasure, man. It's been fun. Thanks for asking good questions.
If you're ever in Ann Arbor again for a concert or something, I'll be sure to be there.
All right, man.
So thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Bye.